Rabbi Wolbe asked me to do this again, and I'm like saying, of course, that I feel like I'm unqualified. And he says, well, everybody says that they're unqualified. So what's the name of this class again?
Pain and Suffering.
Thank you. So I'm like, I just went through, and we explained some of the things that we speak about is things that will hopefully help the intellect. In the mind, we went through different reasons that is handed down, that somehow intellectually a person can somehow grasp some kind of answer to why, but of course it never resolves the heart and how to deal with it. So Rabbi Wolbe advised me, so go with things that you do, how to cope with the everyday situation, which I'm like, I always also feel like I'm unqualified because I'm in the middle of my situation. It's too close, like I discussed last week. We can't discuss the reason for the Holocaust. It's too close. My own situation, it's too close. My son died in April. So, but we go through why, and this. So we're going to discuss today more like things or techniques that a person can do to cope from the religious standpoint. Because if you go to psychologists, they have their techniques, and I'll discuss some of those with you, and we'll talk about some of those, but then some other ones. Okay? But in any case, the first thing, I didn't really recap a little bit last week. We said some things that were a little too brief in the end. So I'm going to share with you a story. Okay? This is a fantastic story in this book that some of you got in the Garden of Emunah. This is the crux of the book. But like I said, this is also going just on what we were talking about last week. Okay? So, a beautiful young lady, daughter of one of the community's most prestigious and respected families, married a righteous merchant, a man of charity and compassion. The early years of their marriage were blessed with happiness, abundance, and children. The modest wife became a wonderful mother, utilizing every free minute of her busy schedule to recite psalms or to care for the community's poor and underprivileged. The husband, whose successful commerce carried him to surrounding cities and hamlets, never failed to fulfill a strict daily quota of prayer and Torah and helping people around. All around righteous family. In addition, he gave enormous amounts to charities all across the country, easing the suffering of thousands of impoverished people. This is in Europe, pre-World War II, maybe about 100 years ago. Suddenly, disaster struck their home. A bright beacon of charity, good deeds, and loving kindness became a scene of agony. A drunken soldier viciously abused, mutilated, and murdered the couple's 3-year-old son. The entire community was appalled. Thousands joined in the mourning, including the nation's leading sages and spiritual leaders. No one understood. Many vocalized the doubts in their hearts in public. Is this the reward that such a righteous couple deserves? Why did Hashem do something so horrendous like that to them? Why did the poor little toddler have to suffer so severely? Others harbored malice in their hearts against Hashem, against God, that weakened their emunah and distanced them from Torah. The couple reacted with total emunah and loving acceptance of the divine decree. They continued with their righteous lifestyle as if nothing had changed. The wife with her acts of loving kindness, and the husband with his Torah learning and magnificent charity. Shortly thereafter, tragedy struck again. Like wildfire, word spread around the town that the righteous merchant had fallen deathly ill. All of the local synagogues mobilized their members in round-the-clock prayer vigils. Everyone loved the merchant. Almost every person in town had benefited from his generosity at one time or another. Understandably, the cries of the community pierced the very thresholds of the heavens. The community beadle began breathlessly into town's main synagogue, where the head rabbi prayed and shouted, "The doctors have given up hope," they said. "The end is near." The head rabbi himself, a pillar of righteousness, and a learned master of Talmudic law, declared forcibly but calmly, "It shall not happen. No evil shall befall our brother, the righteous merchant." The pain and bewilderment of the entire town reached new heights when the word of the righteous merchant's death became common knowledge. Such a young man, at the prime of life, didn't he suffer enough? He did nothing but good deeds his entire life. Is this what he deserved? The tears of the young, barely 35-year-old widow tore at the community's already perplexed and agonized heart. Right? So he passed away. A few years passed. One Friday afternoon, the newly married young son of the young widow came to wish his mother a good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom. She tried to smile, but she burst into tears. "Mama," the young man pleaded, 3 years have passed already. You've cried enough. Our sages prescribed set times for mourning. If someone cries more than they should, then sorrow never leaves them. We are believers. None of us can know Hashem's considerations. Everything Hashem does is for the best. Mama, your crying not only saddens us, your children, but it saddens Papa's soul too. The matchmakers have been chasing after you with several good proposals, and you've been avoiding them. Mama, please, must you continue with your life like this? So the young widow took a deep breath. Enough. She made a firm resolve to overcome the sorrow. An encouraging thought flashed across her mind. Am I more merciful than Hashem? Of course not. I've always trusted Hashem. So why shouldn't I be happy? To the relief of her worried children, that very Shabbos, Mama became a new person. For the first time in years, the widow slept soundly and peacefully. She realized that a lack of emunah, faith, right, not her husband's absence, was responsible for her gap in her heart. Now, the gap was filled again, and she had a dream. She saw herself standing in an exotic garden of supernatural beauty, and she understood that this must be the next world. Standing among the aromatic flowering trees, she saw an image of an old man with a long beard who radiated brilliantly. He approached her and asked if she'd like to see her deceased husband. She nodded in the affirmative. He led her to a magnificent palace where a young man was giving a Torah lecture to thousands of elderly righteous souls. When the lecture was over, the lecturer approached her. It was her husband, the person who was giving this lecture in this palace. "Dearest husband," she exclaimed, "why did you leave me alone at such an early stage in our lives? Have you become the teacher? How have you become the teacher of so many of these tzaddikim, these righteous souls? You were a merchant and an upright man. You were never a big Torah scholar." The husband smiled. "In my former life, I was a great scholar, but I never married. When I died, I was told that I can't assume my designated place in the upper palaces of heaven because I never fulfilled the first commandment of the Torah, namely that one must be fruitful and multiply. Therefore, I was reincarnated again for the sole purpose of marrying and having children, and to raise them in the path of Torah. That's exactly what I did. As soon as I completed my tikkun, which is my soul correction and my mission on earth, I no longer had to remain down there. Now, as you see, I live a life of eternal bliss." "Then why did our little son die?" probed the wife. The husband answered, "He is the lofty soul of a holy tzaddik, an extremely righteous individual. In his previous life, he was kidnapped at birth and raised on the milk of a Gentile surrogate mother. Finally, at age 3, he was redeemed by the Jewish community and subsequently became a sage of enormous spiritual proportions. After his death, he was denied his rightful place in heaven since his early childhood had left a tiny blemish on his soul. His soul tikkun was to return to earth to be born, nursed, and raised for 3 years by an upright Jewish woman. You, dear wife, were granted the privilege of being that woman. But why was his death so terrible?" "Know," continued the husband, "that since our toddler son had completed his tikkun, he was destined to die anyway. At the same time, the heavenly court had decreed, in light of the dire sins between man and his fellow man in our town, that all its inhabitants were decreed to be destroyed in a catastrophic pogrom. The righteous soul of our little one volunteered to die a terrible death as atonement for the entire town. He became a holy martyr and sanctified himself as a public sacrifice. No one is allowed to reach his lofty abode except for me, since I was his father. And when your time comes, you, as his mother, will also be allowed. You can't imagine the bliss of the divine light that surrounds our son. The husband faded away before he departed. His voice reverberated, only by virtue of your reinforced emunah was I revealed to you. As long as you were in a cloud of sadness, you almost lost another child. All my requests to be revealed to you were refused. My tikkun is over, but you still have much to do. Go, remarry, and live a life of faith and joy. Go with my blessing. Farewell. And the husband's image disappeared completely. The widow awakened. She felt like she was born anew. She realized that her questions, as well as the rest of the town's questions, were needless. If the Torah teaches that Hashem is righteous and just, then there's no need to wonder why Hashem does what he does. Those of us who don't merit revelations in our sleep should strive to strengthen in emunah and faith. The knowledge that Hashem does everything for our eternal benefit should be engraved in our hearts and our minds. That is the crux of this book. Okay? So you see, like something that I discussed last week, there's always a huge, bigger picture. And we don't know the voyage, the journey, and the rectifications of souls as they come in this world. We are in complete darkness in this world. Okay? We don't know really why God does the way he does. Okay? So with that, the bottom line that the Sulam did bring down, that I didn't bring down also last week's class, was the Sulam, who was the Rabbi Ashlag, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Ashlag, he lived before the Holocaust. He escaped Poland. And basically it's just a statement of, all human suffering is nothing more than a lack of understanding of what God is doing. Bottom line. We just don't know. We just don't know. Now, like I say before, in Hebrew, this is to the question called lama. Lama.
Why?
Right? But also you can take the vowels and change lama, which means why, to lama, which if you change the vowels, it means for what, which means we go to why and then you go to what, for what purpose.
Where do you go after that?
That's what we're getting to. My father, my brother, he passed away at 39 from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was also a 1.5 bout, and I was in Israel at the time, so I wasn't at the bedside. And I didn't go through, at that time, what my parents went through. And my father, his reaction was different than my mother's reaction. Okay? My father is a person of incredible faith. I don't know if I told you the story about him last week. Did I? He had an inoperable brain tumor.
Who?
My father.
No,
Inoperable brain tumor about 20 years ago. We went to fly to California. Half of his body was shaking every 10 minutes. They gave him 2 weeks to 2 months to live. And he didn't want to do any chemo or radiation. I have a background in alternative medicine. I had tinctures, I had diet plans, and he didn't want to do any of them. I'm like, but Dad, there's the whole parable of the guy in the flood, and the log comes by, and the boat comes by, and the helicopter comes by, and the guy dies, and God says, Shmendrik, I brought you this. And I says, what about that? So he says, no, if I were to take those, and there would be a change, and there would be a healing, it would detract my faith. It would take away my faith in God. He was resolved to go to the hospice if the pain got greater, but he was going to live day to day, day by day. Anyways, to make it short, a year later, he's still around. The shaking has stopped. He went and finally took an MRI, and they couldn't find a trace of a brain tumor in him.
Wow.
He is not an observant man, but he has one mitzvah that is probably greater than many rabbis that I have met. The mitzvah of emunah, of faith. He believes faith to such a degree that God literally is all there is. He says all the time, there's no spot, there's no place. That was the good musical interlude, thank you.
Is that the
From Chariots of Fire.
That wasn't the main part of dun 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 dun, dun when they were running. Okay, anyways. So let's
So what's the message there? How did that
So here's my father, because he was my father, like I said, God is all there is. We are living in an illusion. We are living, right, in a lot of distractions. But we always have to constantly remind ourselves, Hero is real, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And one means He's all there is. He's all there is. In any case, he only looked to God for peace of mind. That's the only thing he did. Okay? My father believes very strongly that, our thoughts are very powerful, very, very powerful, and are mostly responsible for creating our experience and circumstances. So certainly that is true. I'm writing a book about it now, hooking up the Torah sources with that rule. And I found the main source is basically that every thought that we think creates an angel, a malach. That angel only knows how to bring to fruition whatever is the nature of that thought and the energy of the belief of that thought. Lots of people have different thoughts going through their minds. They estimate around 60,000 a day. Some thoughts are deeper than others. Some thoughts have much more resonance and much more energy. Those are tremendous energies that we do create every day.
But Rabbi, is it the emotion behind the thought that gives it its...
Like I said, that the resonance, which means it's the emotion. It's the conviction. Conviction. In any case, so my father lived that, and he was he was a therapist, and the only thing he resolved to go ahead and do in his therapy was to teach about belief in God. That's his therapy. In any case, so fast forward, my brother got sick and passed away. My father, says, okay, he went into another room. His son, my brother, he died. But the way that my father looks at it, and that's really the main thing in terms of how do you cope in the time of the situation. In other words, listen, I'm living with a broken heart. I'm a walking broken heart. Okay? An empty shell. Totally shattered. Somehow I'm walking. Somehow I'm able to sit here and talk to you, even though inside I'm totally bleeding. Okay? So one of the things is, and almost like what we discussed last week, which was you have to keep drilling into your mind different style thinking instead of depression, anxiety, worry, guilt, remorse. Remorse, guilt, huge things. Now, I'm still healing because I'm still traumatized. I get flashes all the time and memories all the time of the past year and a half that my son was going through everything. And it's tremendously debilitating. It's tremendously heartbreaking. So there is a list. There is things that people do. So the first thing always comes about is the thoughts that you think, because they are very powerful. And thoughts come from your perceptions, how you look at it. So that's why what I discussed all the things last week in this story and things like it, reincarnation and all these other things, help to a certain degree, because eventually the intellect does get to the heart. We're trying to get the heart to just not, find a way how to go on living, because it's very hard to find a will even to go on living. Really, it's very difficult. So part of that is you have to keep replugging in thoughts, power thoughts, higher style thinking into the mind. Okay? So one of the things my dad would think, actually, he still connects with my brother in a spiritual way. He holds he's not dead, he's just in a different form. There is no death. And really, that was one of the things that someone said to me at the Shiva of my son. The soul doesn't die. So it's just a body. It's just a casing. It's a shoe. But the soul is still alive. The soul does not die. So my father had a dream, vision, whatever it was that came to him, which was his brother, his son, my brother Mark. So Mark said to him, says, Dad, I can't be with you anymore in the physical way. I don't have a body. You have to find a way to connect with me. It's almost an invitation that a person has to be more spiritual and take off the blinders, the mask of this world, to try to connect to the soul, which is alive, in a different way. It's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. It's almost like God wants you to lift a 50,000 pound weight. Yeah, you can do it. Right? Thank you much. Right? That's what I feel like. God wants you to lift this unbelievable weight that is just seems way too big. But you have to keep fighting. You have to keep pushing. Obviously, because for me, in my situation, I have no choice. I have no choice. Okay? So, a lot of the times that our hearts get broken is that people will, I don't know what your experiences is, but in my experiences, a lot of people say a lot of stupid things. And you just want to, it's very hard. There's a whole list. I didn't bring the list with me of all the stupid things that people say. Well, you have other kids. Thank you much. Doesn't do. Right? That's just one. Okay? Oh, you didn't get over it yet? I mean, really? You'd be amazed. Really. Right? It's a lonely world. It is very, very lonely. Because nobody really knows what you've been through except other people who have been through it. So we went to this bereavement retreat, which helped a lot. I went to a religious bereavement retreat up in Catskills in New York. They have it once a year, High Lifeline. It's a great organization. They flew for us to go out and had us sit with 50 other couples who also had similar losses of children. So different ages, different means, but I didn't understand why. And I still don't understand why, but for some reason, when you just sit with other people, it just takes off just a little bit of the edge. When you realize you're not so alone, and you see it, and you feel it, it just, I don't know, it's some, I think, I came up with it. I got it. It's a verse. It's a verse in Genesis. Thank you. And I said it then. Vahi erev, vahi boker. What does it mean, vahi erev, vahi boker? Vahi erev, which means and it was evening. Literally, it means and it was evening and it was day. He did that through every single day, right? Every single day of the work of creation. But erev is a very interesting word. Erev, ayin reish bet. Erev could be also the word arev. Arev is an interesting word. It mean mix. Mix. Blend. Arev is a blend. When we say that each Jew is a guarantor of this one to this one, we do say this. Kol Yisrael arevim ze bezeh. All Yisrael, every Jewish person is responsible for each other. Now, the word responsible is literally like a cosigner. If they default on a debt, just like a cosigner, so that person has to pick it up, right? The great parable that they give is if a person, let's say if you're in a huge boat and everybody, a bunch of rooms, and all of a sudden the alarm sounds off and the boat's sinking and they sound the alarm and there's a leak somewhere and someone's leaking. So you got to find the leak. So you bust into someone's cabin and the guy's drilling holes in the bottom of his boat. And he says, "It's my cabin. I can do what I want." Well, the reality is it's not your cabin. And you can't do because you're going to sink the whole boat. When a Jewish person goes down, everybody goes down. When they go up, everybody goes up. Why is this so? Because we are all intermingled. Spiritually speaking, we all have a soul. But really, all of our soul is a sliver small sliver, and you can't really divide the slivers, but conceptually speaking, is a sliver of everybody else's soul. You have everybody. You talk about 13 million slivers. That's a lot of slivers, amigo. That's a lot of slivers. But anyways, the idea here is mixed, blended. All the Jewish people are really one.
Did you say 13 million?
I don't know how many million Jews there are in the world.
No,
I say
souls.
15. Somebody corrects me and says 13. I say 16. Someone
No,
says 15.
Souls.
We'll ask Google.
Well, let's look at the individuals that are existing in this generation right here and now in this physical world. 15, 13, whatever you want. It changes. Okay? The idea here is Vahi Erev, Vahi Voker. And it was mixed. In other words, when I went to that conference and there were other people who were bereaving, we were mixed. And went Vahi Erev, and what follows right after the verse?
Morning.
Vahi Boker, and then there was morning. After the evening, meaning first you mix, and then there's morning. In other words, there's light after the night. The light follows after. In other words, so there, I went to a place here in town. They have a bereavement place, center, and they have some of those. And they help for some people, not for others. They didn't help me because the situation was no one lost a child the way I lost them. The other people had children who lost their older sons in different ways, and and then there was one guy who lost his wife. This guy lost his mother, and I'm like, it wasn't a match for me, but it could be a match for people who are going through that kind of sorrow. So the issue would be really, if for any suffering to do, would be to find someone else who's going through the same suffering. Otherwise, it's a lonely world. And then speak about it. You have to speak. It's about speaking because it comes from the inside out. And there's a healing in it. There's a healing in it. At least takes an edge off. Okay? The way I found to cope was, of course, which most men do, is that we get distracted. We find ways to get distracted. Whatever it is, everybody has their way, right? I don't go to the golf course because I don't think that would distract me. I learn Torah. I like learning. I like teaching. I find, that's how I seem to be able to lose myself, and I put myself on a project or a mission. I'm going to learn this certain book, finish this book. I'm going to do a page a day of this or whatever it is. I set a goal for myself, and therefore I'm on that. So in other words, it's a reality. I discussed it with a therapist. Yes, it's okay. I'm on. But what if I'm going to lose out on the grieving? I'm going to bury it. You're not going to bury it. It's there. It's going to come, and it does come. Because every time I'm alone for a minute, it comes back to me. And it's part of that process. I did have a dream, a few months ago, summer, and it was a bizarre dream. I was walking with some righteous soul. I didn't know who he was, but he was definitely one of them. And we were walking down this path, this field, and the only thing I can from what he's saying is time. Time is a dimension. You have to go through this dimension. And the people at the bereavement center did say time. Time makes it better. Even though my wife is on Facebook and she goes through people who lost their children 5, 10, 15 years ago, and they're not feeling any better. Okay? One of the fathers whose son died just like my son. He's like 7 years out, and he says it gets better with time. That's what he told me. Like I'm not there yet, so I can't say yes or no. Okay? Because my wife goes on Facebook and a lot of people don't beg to differ. But that's mothers. Mothers and men and women are just completely different. Mothers had the kid in their stomach, gave birth to the child. The connection is unbelievable. Well, that's why we have the laws of mourning, usually. And if a person follows to the T the laws of mourning, it's the process. Because you see how it gets from intense to less intense, right? So a person, hopefully, if he goes through that, he will be able to process and be involved somewhat in his healing, Instead of, if a person, I know people whose their father died, they were at work the next day. right? That's not what to do. And the person is suffering, and it's been years down the line because they locked it in and didn't process, right? So, meanwhile, the process of, the first 7 days, you got to sit in the house. You can't go out. Can't wear shoes. You got to sit on the floor. You got to dig deep. People come, and it's not really for such a distraction. The people who come really are supposed to come, and you know the law?
Don't talk unless...
Don't talk until you're spoken to. Not, You're not supposed to talk, chat. No chat. No chatting. You sit down in front of the mourner, and you keep your mouth shut. And when he speaks, he speaks. And whatever they speak about, they have to get it out of their system. And it's part of the process. And then there's the 30 days. They can't grow their hair, listen to music, can't go to parties. And if it's for a parent, you can't go to a wedding for a whole year. Can't go to a real joyous event for a whole year for a parent. Say Kaddish. All part of that is the processing. It's all part of a process that you have healing. So I believe in the Torah's directives of the mourning and the system that they set up, there is a healing. It's at least a parameter where a healing could take place. You're right, a person can always bury it and just ignore it, but they'll come out of the closet eventually. The other thing that my therapist told me, besides getting distracted, is exercise, of course, because you got to blow off steam. You create the endorphins from exercising, and it's just a way of because my patience was like this. I had so much stuff going on when we came back from Israel in our house. My teenage kids were back. I had my brother-in-law living in my house. We were trying to catch up from like a year and a half of dental appointments, doctor's appointments, that everybody had their own little thing. My son needed knee surgery. My daughter had, needed to get diagnosed. She found out she has Crohn's, and she's just a whole bunch of stuff just going on. This one had, dentist, it was just, every week was 3, 4, 5 appointments. It was like schlepping all week long. My patience was up to here. I was not getting any time for myself, and I was not recognizing when I need a break, take the break. If I needed a break, my therapist told me, you go take a break. You just say, I need a break. Because otherwise you lose it. And what happened was I had a situation where I did lose it. I lost it. Okay, I don't want to say the situation. I laugh at it today, but I lost it several times. You get angry and it just anger doesn't solve anything. Okay, so they said exercise because it'll help you to be balanced so you can deal with situations that come out. Didn't solve the problem, made it easier, more tolerable. Nothing's going to solve it because, like I say, I'm in the middle of it. What are you asking from me? How do you cope with the situation? This is how I was told to cope. Writing in a journal. Okay, that's good. I haven't done that yet. I'd like to. It's on the list. But, you need discipline for that, and I'm down to, let's say, before the whole situation with Alicia, maybe I would operate at 60% concentration. Now I'm down to 5. Okay, you're lucky I can even keep this class. I'm not talking about other things, right? I'm not totally focused, okay? So...
Did you try meditation? Does that work for you?
Well, my prayer, that's what we're going to get to. The biggest thing. The biggest thing that I felt that helped me the most is prayer. But it's not a regular prayer. Okay, we'll just cut to the chase here. Okay? There is a sect of Hasidim called Breslov Hasidim. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, a place in Ukraine, has a huge following in Israel. It's just going leaps and bounds. You would go up to his grave on Rosh Hashanah. Used to be barely 10 men, 20 men. That was maybe 25 years ago. Now it's 30,000, maybe 40.
He's everywhere.
Yeah, I teach a Breslov class on Ireland Minyan on Thursday nights.
Thursday night?
Yes, I do.
Thursday night, darn.
It's unbelievable stuff. You read that stuff, it's just, it's unbelievable.
What is it in a nutshell?
What is Hasidic thought, you're asking? Hasidic thought basically takes from very deep Kabbalistic principles, but it puts it into a way that the layman, you and me, can not only understand it, but practice it and have an unbelievably deep connection to the infinite. Very simple. In other words, it explains why. It explains a lot of things that go on that you can actually grasp. It's not over the head. It basically takes off and looks at the Torah in terms of the principle. The main principle is that it is a soul guide for you to connect to God right here and now. Okay? It is a soul guide. Every single letter has a relevance for you in the here and now. Yes, we understand the book, the 5 books of Moses. It's a history. It has history of the Jewish people, and they went. No. It is a soul code given from the infinite, and you have to delve into it in a way that you have to connect to its meaning and relevance right here and now. That's what Hasidic thought is. Okay? It could be, now Musar is a certain form of that. Okay?
So,
Because you connect to, let's say, moral lessons that you can extract from the 5 books of Moses. This is deeper. What?
You connect to one. I didn't hear you say.
I forgot
Lessons.
what I said.
Lessons.
Lessons you can extract, the moral lessons, let's say ethical, nice, ethical, unbelievable, all the ethical teachings you can extract from it.
Yeah.
But the Hasidus goes just a deeper level because there's a soul, there's a God, there's you and God. Right? And it's much deeper. Okay? So, in any case, Rabbi Nachman, one major thing in his teaching that he directs his students to do, that really it's not something that he innovated, it's something that always existed, but he made sure, and he emphasized it, was to go out for an hour a day and talk to God in your own language. Preferably the forest or a place where people aren't bothering you and there's no distraction. And you can even do this in your house. You find a corner, a closet, whatever it is, where it's a comfortable place where you can sit for an hour and pour out your heart to God in your own language. For an hour a day they do this. Now, I say halavai, a person could do it for a minute or 2 minutes. I've met some because our schedules just... But I have found that the days that I did it for an hour, the rest of the day was like butter. Somehow there's an ease. And not only that, usually chores or things that would take you hours would be done in half the time, if not a fraction of the time. Somehow, because you know why? And it's really so clear. It's really so clear. Is God wants an intimate relationship with us. Bottom line, everything. All of our purpose in life is for God wants to be intimate with us. The problem is we don't want to be intimate with Him. Right? As long as we got a gimme list, gimme. I love you, God. I love you, God. I love you, love. As long as you give me this, give me that, give me that. Right? It's a tit for tat. It's a business situation. That's not a relationship. It's a relationship, but it's not the ideal relationship. You must admit
that it's not that we don't want the relationship. For me, anyways, I don't know how to deepen that relationship.
Okay, awesome, good. You're connected. I'm not saying everybody. Okay.
Rabbi, it's hard to experience God's love. It's so intense. It's hard to keep it up. It's like we don't deserve it. It's like, how can we accept it? It's hard to spend more than
No,
2 minutes.
our whole tikkun is to accept it. It's a hard one. God, I can't. It's hard for me to accept it. Please help me to accept it. God, it's so hard. I'm feeling so inadequate. God, please help me develop within myself a sense of adequacy. That's our biggest problem. According to one Kabbalist, the Leshem, he brought it down. It's been the problem of the Jewish people from the get-go. From the time we left Egypt, all through the desert, we tested him 10 times because of our sense of inadequacy. We couldn't take the love. We couldn't take it. So we had to test God. What if I do this? Is he still going to love us? What if we do this? What if we allow it? Really, they didn't do it. They allowed it to happen. They saw the golden calf. They weren't instigating the golden calf. The Erev Rav, the mixed multitude, was instigating the golden calf. But they allowed it because they wanted to see if God was still going to love them. But silence is agreement. But in any case, it's been the whole problem of us, that our biggest problem in Emunah, which is a whole other topic for discussing, is our belief in ourselves. The Jewish people in general don't believe in ourselves. We don't believe that God gave us the land of Israel, and it's our land. We don't believe that, or at least a huge percentage don't believe it, and they happen to be the ones who are in power now. So in any case, there's huge things to go through, but even individually, a person really, even after he believes that God is making everything and it's for the good, and even though he doesn't really see it's for the good, but even then, we still have to believe in ourselves. It's the biggest problem. It's really the biggest, because we really don't believe that we are carved from God's essence. We have a very, very holy soul. We have absolutely no idea how holy and how powerful we are as a people. We come from Superman. Did you believe that? Did you know that? We're descendants of the man who walked through fire.
Abraham.
I mean, that's the legend. Believe it or not, this guy was thrown into a huge fire and he walked out. I mean, they don't speak about that about other people. Even if you don't want to believe it, I don't tell stories like that about you or me. Abraham was thrown in the fire. He was in, and he walked out. I mean, that's the tradition, right? So here you go. He's a Superman in a certain sense, just to give you a little bit of a colorful imagery. And we're descendants of that. And even beyond that, the word of Torah, I don't know if they posted it on the website, we're even not supposed to even be here. Abraham wasn't supposed to have children. All the nature, all the doctors said he'll never give birth. The astrology and the stars, he saw it. He was a master astrologer. He saw it in stars. And God says, let's take you beyond that. And he gave birth to a child, right? Something beyond nature. We come from beyond nature. We don't even know about us. We don't even know about us. We don't know where you are. So anyways, going back here to coping. It's a very lonely road, okay? So I talked about his bodidus, right? So I'm just going to go a little bit more on there. Just don't need to know what time it is. What time is it?
It's 11:57.
Oh, wait. I'm going to got sheets here. I don't have enough because, it happened to come out in a class I gave yesterday and they took them all. I wasn't prepared either. I have 4 sheets, but we can email you. Okay, I have to keep one because I need for photocopies. But I have 3 sheets. Basically, it gives you the play-by-play rundown of when you're in your little place.
If you give me one, I'll copy for the people that listen.
Oh, you got a connection.
I got connection.
I'll give you 3 copies, and you can just finish the rest for
I'll take
everybody.
care of my 2.
Okay.
We'll take care
Basically, I'm telling you from my personal, and really the problem is I don't pray to do this every day. To go and spend an hour a day and pour out your heart. This formula I'm handing out is a 20-minute formula. It's a 20-minute formula. Okay. In other words, if you go and you do follow this step by step, okay. And just pour out your heart to God. You got to get used to it. And it might be weird at first. You have to know God is there. God is listening. He will answer. You have to seek truth. You just want to know truth. God wants the connection. Okay? Now, other things that we need to do. Prayer is the main thing. There's another thing. The very astounding thing that I heard. And we don't know the reason why, but we're small individuals. Rabbi Nachman says an amazing thing. We're in a process. We're all in a process, and part of that process is cleansing. That's one of the 3 reasons why God brings these tests to certain people. One is cleansing. To cleanse that person. Smeltering. You got to take out the schmutz. The other thing is to test. To test meaning like if a person wants to sell an item in a store, let's say a pot, something durable, and he wants to show off to the people, to the merchants or the prospective buyers, so he'll test it. You'll bang it against the thing. You'll get a camel to sit on it. I don't know which face. You'll bang it with a hammer, whatever, to show the durability of this vessel. Okay? The other reason, basically, is to blaze a path.
What?
The third reason that God sends these kind of circumstances to people is to blaze a new path. Blaze a new path, which means basically you have to take the sorrow, you have to take the pain, and you have to use it as a motivation to bring something new out into the world, to do something with the pain, to have it be a motivator for you. Many people do this. My wife, let's say, the only way that she can deal with the pain is to try to raise consciousness of people about brain tumors, pediatric brain tumors, get in the face of the FDA about their crookedness, because they, we applied for compassionate care. We had a 100,000 people petition that the government was supposed to get involved in it. It took them 6 months to do. Why did it do that? You got a life on the line. You're applying for compassionate care for a medicine that they said when we called them, we will never let this medicine, ever. And then 5 months, 6 months later, they go away, called up and says, when my son was already brain dead in a hospital, we couldn't move him in Manhattan. Oh, we want to, we just granted the compassionate use care for our son. It's a little bit too late for that. She wrote a stinging letter that's going to come out against them and against a lot of other people. Anyway, she'll use it for a campaign to go ahead and try to find a cure for that disease. Everybody has their own. I know another person also in Florida, same situation. I happen to know him because his son at 21 years old died of a brain tumor. He has now started a foundation. He went into retirement, and he has a foundation to find the cure for brain tumors. Okay? In other words, you can use it as a motivator, which is hard for me because, like I say, I'm not there. I'm in a different space, and I'm too fresh to be using that as a motivator. I'm just saying certain things. Okay? Now, about prayer, another little thing I just heard that the Rambam, there's a Rambam quoted from this Rebbitzin, Yemima Mizrahi, says, in the morning, because in the morning sometimes it's very hard, you wake up and you have a cloud of darkness. So, the Rambam says you put your right hand on the mezuzah and you pray for strength. For that day only. God, give me strength for this day. Stop thinking 20 years down the line, because most people's their thoughts are already 20 years. How am I going to live through this? For today, right? What will happen to me? What? Who will encourage me then? What's going to happen? Don't even go there. Get up, put your hand on the mezuzah and say, Hashem, today, give me strength today. Help me smile for the people around me. The biggest thing is, bottom line, you have to give others. Because if we waddle in our own sorrow and suffering, like I say, like we read in the story, it blocks certain things. Because like I said, until the lady in the story that I read, until she gave up that cloud of sadness and was willing to say, maybe there's a different life I could lead, then her husband didn't come to her in a dream because she was blocking it. So in other words, sadness was going to block it. So you got to get out of sadness. Now, that's not easy, because how do you cope with a day-to-day experience? The last thing that I'm going to discuss in terms of coping with it, which is not necessarily coping, but it helps. It's a great tikkun. It's a great rectification, because it is part of that cleansing, which is that Rabbi Nachman brings down, saying Shema is a very powerful thing. When you say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. There's actually 12 words. And we say, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Voed, blessed be his glorious name forever and ever. We say it in Hebrew, it ends up being really 6 and 6, total of 12 words. 12 words really are the 12 tribes of Israel. If you count the letters of Shema Israel, right, it's 49 letters, which if you count all of the names of the tribes of Israel, it's 49 letters. It is the tribes. You do go into a vortex. When you say, Hear, O Israel, you are reconnecting to the great soul and to the great purpose of creation. But Rabbi Nachman goes so far as to say, not only that, if when a person has a bad thought, he says the Shema. It's known in our tradition. Any bad thought, even whatever it is, a depressing thought, most specifically he's referring to a lewd thought, but any kind of negative thought, you say the Shema, and especially if you could say it with tears. If you accept the yoke of the kingdom of heaven with tears, that's the ultimate cleanser. Now, How do you say it with tears? So the idea here is the eitzah, the advice to you in terms of to help forward the cleansing is if you find yourself crying, in which I often do, say the Shema at that moment and accept this is God's plan. We don't know why. There's a purpose to the suffering. But they discovered something very interesting, that you could take an onion, cut it, and it will bring tears to a person. And you could take, but then there's the real tears. And they tested out the tears, the difference between this and this. And they discovered that tears from an onion is just water. It's just salt water. But the tears from sadness, actually there are poisons in those tears. Now, and as soon as I heard that, I went, that's Rabbi Nachman. Because when you are crying and you're saying the Shema, you're exuding, you're pushing out the poisons in your body, in your spleen mostly, because that's where, a lot of this, the dark thoughts. In Kabbalah, that's where, in mysticism, that's where the dark thoughts come from. The negative thinking comes from certain parts of the body that somehow gripped on during stressful moments in our life, gripped on to negative emotions and negative feelings. So that's where they're exuded out through the eyes, through the tears.
We mustn't lick our tears.
I heard the only...
What was that, Tom? What'd you say?
Don't lick the tears, you just take the poison back in.
Well, yeah. But, I never heard that. But I did hear that the only liquid that we're allowed to ingest that comes from our body, meaning our sweat. You're not allowed to, you shouldn't lick your sweat, right? You shouldn't drink your sweat. Of course it's going to happen. But basically the sweat of your brow you could eat. Okay? You can only consume the sweat of your brow. Because it says, by the sweat of your brow you shall live. Genesis. Everything else, and they do know that the sweat of the rest of the body is poisons. So in any case, the biggest advice, if you're in the car, you shut off the radio and you talk to God while you're in your car. While you're pumping gas. Most people, I don't know what they're thinking when they're pumping gas. Right? I don't know what they're thinking. I'm like, I got to do a video on that one time, What can you think of when you're pumping gas? You could talk to God. God, please, give me strength just for today. God, I'm feeling really down. Help me to want to be intimate with you. Even though maybe I'm not 100% there, help me to be there a little bit more. Help me to remove the blockages. Help me to be more intimate.
It's symbolic with refueling.
There you go. Hey, you hooked it up. Thank you. Thank you, Phyllis. Okay?
Is there a
Thank
book
you
that
very much.